What's going on, everybody? My name is Curci, and I want to do a little bit of a different video today. I noticed that about 3 years ago, I put out a video titled The Ideas for Star Wars Spin-Offs, which was just me spitballing ideas for what Star Wars could do for future spin-offs. Now, again, this video is almost 3 years old, so a lot of it's going to be outdated. And we also know a whole lot about what Star Wars is going to do in the immediate future. But yet I noticed that a lot of people commented their own Star Wars spin-offs. And I kind of want to address every single one of these, how that could work, and is it even something that I would be interested in? So let's get into the first one here, which is from Dog Lord 8000, which is no Teen Yoda. Okay, let's make a Baby Yoda then. This is in reference to the idea to potentially do a Yoda movie. Now, granted, in the original video, I did not say that this was something that I think that they should do. In honesty, I think Yoda got enough screen time, not only in the prequels and the original trilogy, he also gets a lot of screen time in the Clone Wars TV series. I think the biggest mistake that they did with Anakin was to make him a very whiny teen. He was always complaining, oh, it's not fair. I don't want them to have the opportunity to do that to Yoda. And you're looking at a character that is 900 years old, almost a millennium worth of experiences that Yoda has had. I think that there's things that we can explore with a younger Yoda, but I wouldn't go so far as to do like an origin story for Yoda. I don't think that that's a question that we need answered. It's funny that your comment's worded the way it is. It's important to remember that Baby Yoda and actual Yoda are not the same characters. Actually, here he is right here, two different characters. We always called him Baby Yoda because we didn't know what his name, and we all refused to refer to him as the child, but now we know after Mandalorian Season 2 that this character's name is Grogu. Okay, so let's go to Bob Sample Tank? Whatever. We've never seen Boba Fett do anything cool. God, I love that this video is outdated and he actually does something. Once again, this video, in my defense, is 3 years old. And it only took 30 plus years for Boba Fett to do something. Keep in mind, in the original trilogy, all he did was he tracked down Han Solo and reported it to the Empire. The Empire captured him, and then he took him to Jabba. And then in Return of the Jedi, he got taken out by a very blind, disoriented Han Solo. Then he fell in the Sarlacc pit. And until Mandalorian Season 2, in canon, was dead. But in Mandalorian Season 2, he comes back. And he has one of the greatest character moments in all of Star Wars, in my opinion. The moment where he gets his armor back and he starts destroying those Stormtroopers. Oh my God, one of the greatest things ever. And now we are getting a Boba Fett series, the Book of Boba Fett. I'm super excited about that. But it only took 30 plus years for it to happen. But thank you for your comment. Bad Milks writes, so I love your idea. Here's another one. How about a rogue force user wielding a silver/white lightsaber and signifying no true allegiance to either side of the force? The story can be about this force user being a bounty hunter sent to kill both Jedi and Sith for money. Or maybe a love story, past tense, before Clone Wars, between a Jedi and Sith, and then it either ends in this balance between the two, which results in true balance/peace in the galaxy, either by a child or a new religious branch to the Force. Another idea may be a scary thriller named 66, and it's about a youngling who was alone in a planet, master killed, and is escaping the clones, and let the movie be rated R and brutal. Well, thank you for your comment. You have three things there, so let's break the first one down. I really like this idea of a rogue force user. Keep in mind, Ahsoka also has white lightsabers and also is not part of the Jedi Order. In fact, as far as just being a rogue force wielder that uses a white lightsaber, Ahsoka is that right now. But I wouldn't call her a bounty hunter. That's the interesting thing about this comment, because if you consider that this is a force wielder who might have been maybe a Sith or a Jedi, decided to be neither. Maybe they were both at one point. Maybe they left the Jedi, joined the Sith, and then they were like, this is too extreme in the other direction, so I'm just going to walk the middle. But now they're specially equipped to deal with either Sith or Jedi. Let's just say a crime lord has been having a lot of problems with the specific Jedi that keeps cracking down on his business. And he's like, listen, I know that you are specially trained to deal with force users, so I'll pay you money and you go take out this Jedi. I think that'd be a very interesting story. But let's talk about this love story. So there's two things I want to point out here. This is not the first time that Star Wars has done the star-crossed lovers idea. In fact, let me pull this up right here. This right here is Star Wars Lost Stars. Let me get it in frame actually proper here. It's by Claudia Gray. It starts off in the early days of the Empire, and you have these two children who grow up and they are starstruck by the idea of what the Empire is meant to be or supposed to be. And so when they are old enough, they join the academy, they become pilots. Basically what happens is the Death Star Destroyers Alderaan, and one of the characters realizes, crap, I don't want to be a part of this. They just blew up a planet, and he joins the rebellion. But the interesting thing is that the two characters, while being childhood friends, also eventually fall in love, and so now you have one who is very devoted to the Empire and loyal to the Empire, and another who is disillusioned by what the Empire is doing and join the rebellion. So not the first time that you have like two opposing sides. But what you're referring to is specifically Jedi and Sith. And so I'm going to bring up the other thing, which is if you ever played Knights of the Old Republic, there's a character, there's a party member that you can have. His name is Jolee Bindo. One of my favorite characters to talk to in that game. I think his experiences, he's a Jedi, he's a bit of an older guy, he's seen some things. But one of the stories that he tells, during the days of Exar Kun, I believe it was, you had Jedi who turned to the dark side and then fought against their friends. Jolee Bindo found his wife. He realized that she was force sensitive. They fell in love. He took it upon himself to train her. But then when Exar Kun started jumping around, she kind of started liking what he was saying. She turned to the dark side, and it actually resulted in a battle between the two. So if you're talking about a story specifically about a Jedi and a Sith wanting to fight each other, but they're also in love, I think using Jolee Bindo, that would be a prequel to Knights of the Old Republic, because the interesting thing about Knights of the Old Republic is that being a role-playing game with multiple endings, it's hard to make something that comes after that that's, you know, canonic with the story, because in Knights of the Old Republic, if you go a certain way with your choices in that game, Jolee Bindo can die. So this story I don't think can be after Knights of the Old Republic, but I think you could totally do something before. It'd be based in the Old Republic time period. You'd be telling a great story about a great character, and it would fit to this idea. But this idea of finding balance, I think, is interesting as well, because you would have the two sides talking to each other. They love each other. They have a mutual respect, obviously, because they love each other. They're like, you know what? I disagree with your points on this, but I agree with your points on this, and maybe we can find a middle ground and we form a new religion. This idea of a child bringing balance to the Force, I don't think that you inherit the religion. Like, being a Jedi is not inherited. Your ability to connect with the Force could be potentially inherited. It's not like a race, you know? Jedi and Sith are a religion. They're an idea. I mean, maybe that's a choice that the child makes at some point, or does the child decide to form their own path? We don't know, but an interesting idea. Your other idea of a scary thriller named 66, obviously based on Order 66 during the Jedi Purge, I think it's an interesting story that has yet to be told. I think that we have like some things here and there. In the Vader comics, they touch on a couple of Jedi that are trying to survive. Some Jedi decide to uproot themselves, have very different lives. But a specific movie that is focused in horror, where you say it's a youngling. I don't think younglings were ever in the front lines of Clone Wars, but I still think that you can have a Padawan that is relatively young. Like we see that with Jedi Fallen Order. Cal Kestis was very young when Order 66 got issued, and he was on a Republic cruiser and had to get off. So like, what happened when he got off? If you're in that game, you can high five one of the other clone troopers. Like, there was a connection there, and now that same clone trooper is trying to kill you. So I think that that's like a psychological horror where you build up this story of these characters and the connection between the youngling and the clone troopers. I think this is an interesting story because I don't think we have a whole lot of stories about Jedi who are trying to survive Order 66, and the added of it's a youngling. Maybe they got away from the temple and now they're just on the streets of Coruscant behind enemy lines trying to survive, and they're being hunted just simply because they follow a certain religion. It could be truly terrifying and truly horrific. I don't know about it being rated R though. I don't think Star Wars would ever do something rated R, because I think Star Wars is inherently for children. I think that you can explore mature themes, and maybe you do something that is more horror inspired but not really horror focused. I don't think they would ever do a rated R. As much as I would love to see like a rated R Vader movie where he's just literally cutting Jedi up, I don't think they would ever do that. Banana Films, how about a movie featuring Anakin's training at the temple, or the story of Cad Bane? That would be nice. I feel like we have enough of Anakin. Between the prequels, Clone Wars, there's this idea of wanting to expand the universe rather than focusing on a lot of the same characters over and over and over. So when we talk about Anakin's training, I guess it would be interesting because of a couple of things. One is that he is older than a normal youngling would be at that stage of their training. So he'd be very out of his element. Perhaps he'd be the subject of some bullying because he's so much older. So it's almost like he got held back a few years when you're in school and now kids are making fun of you for it. When it comes to the idea that he is the chosen one, I mean, obviously he advanced a lot quicker than other people did. Trying to think of a story they could tell. I mean, I don't know if it's canon, but I know that there's another Yoda species by the name of Yaddle who is on the Jedi Council, and she appears in Phantom Menace and then never again. And I think in Legends, there's a story about how Anakin and Yaddle had a connection. I think Anakin gets kidnapped and Yaddle tries to save him, but it results in Yaddle's death, something like that. Please don't, quote me. I might be totally wrong on remembering this story, but it really affects Anakin, the death of Yaddle. I think that could be a story that they tell where we do get a little bit more screen time of this character that we know is canon because she appears in the Phantom Menace, so we have time to learn about this character, but then also seeing the connection between her and Anakin, and then with her death, how does that affect Anakin? That could be an interesting story to tell. A story of Cad Bane. I like Cad Bane. I think he's a great character. I don't know if he's a great starring role. I don't think his story was ever concluded in Clone Wars. He popped up maybe only a few times in Clone Wars, but I would love to see more Cad Bane. I'd be really interested in that. I wonder if he would possibly appear in the Boba Fett series. The Senate writes, the Boba Fett and Rebels Black Hawk Down concept sound new and lucrative. So we know we're getting Boba Fett, and we know that as of right now, the book of Boba Fett is going to be centered around Boba Fett after he takes Jabba's palace. Boba Fett killed Bib Fortuna, who took Jabba's place, and now Boba takes his place. So now Boba is essentially a crime lord. So now we get to explore more of that, which is why I bring up Cad Bane, because now I'm wondering if we see that criminal underground. Is Cad Bane even still around? I mean, you would think he would be, but it'd be really interested to see him pop back up. The Rebels Black Hawk Down. If you haven't seen Black Hawk Down, it is a fantastic war movie. It's with the theme of no one gets left behind. There's a helicopter, a Black Hawk, that gets shot down during a mission, and so now they have to go and rescue the people that were on that helicopter. By doing that, it puts them in further danger, and so things kind of go awry. So this idea of Rebels in like a Black Hawk Down scenario, we know that Disney Plus is going to be doing a series called Andor, which is featuring Cassian Andor, which is the character from Rogue One. When you watch Rogue One, Cassian says that he did things that he's not proud of in the name of the rebellion, and he's bloodied his hands. So have a lot of people. So we're going to see those stories told. I think we're going to see a much darker side to the rebellion, and perhaps through this series we can see something that is Black Hawk Down related, where it's supposed to be an in-out easy job and just things go wrong and it just progressively gets worse from there. Thomas Burns Jr. writes, dude, I think they listen to you. They are making a Rogue Squadron movie. Yes, they are. They announced at the 2020 investor meeting for Disney, or Investor Day, that they are going to be doing a Rogue Squadron movie. Now, I don't know if we have a whole lot of details about it. I think it's safe to assume that it will be during the original trilogy era, that it's going to be during the time of the rebellion against the Empire. Is it going to feature something like Wedge Antilles, a character that we know has flown an X-Wing? Is Luke Skywalker going to be in it? I would say Luke Skywalker is not going to be in it. I'm okay with the cameo of like a Wedge Antilles or even like a Mon Mothma cameo, but I really hope that they feature new characters. Again, this whole idea of expanding the universe, telling the stories from new perspectives. You have your squad. Some of them don't really get along, but then they find a way to come together because they're united against a threat. And ultimately, when you're flying in a squadron, you have to have each other's backs. You hear it all the times in like war movies where people are in planes where like, hey, there's a guy on me. I need someone to get him off. You better hope and trust the person who's going to fly in and take out the person who's behind you. And I think that there's ways that you can even go forward with it in like a sequel. Like what happens after the events of the original trilogy. Super interested, and I'm glad that they're doing it. But yeah, it was something that I put in the video and we did get it confirmed. Tristan Berg writes, I know I'm late, but I personally would love to see a big Clone Wars live action war movie. It wouldn't be the most in-depth story, but a Clone Wars war movie would be cool. When I say war movie, I mean Black Hawk Down, Saving Private Ryan kind of thing. Obviously, we got that to an extent with the Clone Wars. It would be cool to see a full battle in live action. Personally, I'd like Commander Bly and the 327th as the main characters. Okay, so here's my personal take on anything Clone Wars related. Originally, I had the idea of doing something that was like featuring clones and clone troopers, and let's make some characters out of these clone troopers. They're more than just faceless person behind a helmet. But we do get a lot of that during the Clone Wars TV series. There's a lot of arcs where it features and focuses on the characters that are the clones. This commenter is referring to Commander Bly in the 327th, which is, if you don't know, the same unit that follows Aayla Secura. It's also the same unit that kills her in Revenge of the Sith on the planet Felucia. I don't think Commander Bly got a ton of screen time during Clone Wars, so honestly, I think I'd be on board for that. I think the biggest pull in an idea like this is that you're doing Clone Wars live action. I think that's the big takeaway. Just like a big scale battle. You referenced Saving Private Ryan, like something similar to D-Day, like storming the beaches of Normandy, but in the Star Wars universe. Like you took the skies and now you gotta land your ground troops, but there's heavy troops on the ground and they're all firing and all the troopers are trying to get out and they're all being fired at, maybe even building up to Order 66. We always follow the Jedi post Order 66, but we don't always follow the clones. Maybe we do build up to Order 66 where we do see Aayla Secura being killed, and then we go, okay, what did Commander Bly do after that? Because even if you look at Revenge of the Sith, on Utapau, is that the name of the planet that Obi-Wan goes to? They were helping the native people on that planet, but then after Order 66, all of a sudden they started arresting them. There's a scene where you see them being arrested and taken away. I think it'd be interesting to watch this characters that we grow to like, and then a flip happens. Essentially, that's what it was. It was like a switch got flicked in their head, and now they're evil. So I think that'd be an interesting story to tell. The more I talked about it, the more I was on board for it. Joseph Jenkins writes, make a film based on Star Wars Racer, shoot it as an ESPN 30 for 30 documentary. I don't know if they would do this. Maybe it's something that they could potentially do as like a little one-off for Disney Plus, like this documentary of this pod racer. I think that's an excuse to bring back in Sebulba. I know he's not a very important character as far as the narrative of Star Wars, but as far as like, again, building out this world, as far as being in the racing community and being a pod racer, I think it'd be a fun little 30-minute documentary that they shot that's based in Star Wars about a pod racer, and he has a rivalry with Sebulba. I think that'd be a neat idea. Connor Wilson here, who writes, I keep coming back to think about these different concepts and what could work given the current canon. Here's a few ideas I've had that I think could work. The Adventures of Dr. Aphra. Dr. Aphra is a very cool non-live action character that I'd love to see get brought to life, whether that be in a show or film. A crime-focused story, a story of stylized film focused on a more gritty side to the galaxy, have a likable protagonist who's too deeply invested with all the wrong people. Think Baby Driver, I guess. Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina, not sure if it could work as a feature film, but you could do a shortened Disney Plus film or something like that. Basically use the concept from the book and tell lots of small-scale stories without any Jedi involved, have them all tie in at the end as well. Stormtrooper buddy comedy. This one kind of just came off the top of my head, but as a contrast to all the war movies and gritty spin-offs that everyone wants, how about you have a couple of troopers, can be clones, can be stormtroopers, whatever works best, who aren't cut out for war, but get thrown in anyway and have to find their way on insane missions. So you have some interesting ideas here, but let's talk about the Dr. Aphra one. If you don't know who Dr. Aphra is, now I don't know a ton about her, admittedly, but she is a character who I know clashes with Darth Vader. Not literally, she doesn't fight him, she pushes his buttons. He is so annoyed by her, he hates her, and he wants to kill her, but she does have certain assets that are beneficial to the Empire. Someone who the Empire sees as a threat that they turn into an asset. I think that could work. A crime-focused story about a likable protagonist too deeply invested with all the wrong people. I believe we have the groundwork for that already. If you ever watch Solo, you know that Emilia Clarke's character, Kira, is a likable protagonist, but she's involved with Darth Maul and his criminal underground and his criminal syndicate. I think it could be a follow-up to the Solo movie without featuring Han Solo himself, but I think it'd be super interesting to have Kira being the focus. Emilia Clarke starring in her own Star Wars movie, showing the criminal underside of the galaxy, but also filling in the gap with Maul's story. There's two gaps with Maul. Between Clone Wars and Solo, where we know that like he's in power, he has his criminal empire, but what exactly happened after he escaped Order 66? But then there's another gap after Solo and into Rebels. And Rebels, we know that Maul doesn't have his criminal empire anymore, so what happened to it? This could be a movie that answers that question. Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina, I don't think that they would do particularly. You say it could be a shortened Disney Plus film. Maybe, but if you ever seen Dunkirk, it's a World War II movie, but the story is told in a non-linear way. It's told from the perspective of three characters. There's a fighter pilot, there is a civilian who's on a boat, and it's also told from the perspective of the soldiers on the beach. But they're all told across a different point in time. So you have the fighter pilot, his story takes place over the course of an hour, civilians in the boat, which takes place over the course of a day, and the soldiers on the beach, which takes place over the course of a single week. The story is flipping back and forth between all of them, and you're seeing events happen, but you don't know the context of it right away. But as the story progresses, you see those events. For example, at one point, the fighter pilot flies over and he sees a boat that is kind of capsized and has oil spilling out. And then you find out later how that happened. And eventually it all links up. When I was reading this comment, that was something that popped into my head. You can have this smuggler who's just trying to get his ship loaded so that he can ship it to where he's got to get to, but then he bumps into this guy who's running from the Empire. You don't know that story fully until later, but looking at the Mos Eisley Cantina, there are so many different races. I assume that there's crazy amounts of stories that can be told. Perhaps a short thing that they did, something like the 30 for 30 thing. But a trooper buddy comedy, the idea of who aren't really cut out for war. I don't see the clones being that, because I think the clones are bred for war. They are trained to be warriors, to be soldiers. That is what they're meant to do. So the idea of they're not really cut out for war, even though in the Clone Wars series we do see that some clones, because they are people, have a harder time learning or taking commands or whatever. However, I still think that this could be a better fit for Stormtroopers, because I think Stormtroopers are the butt end of a joke. They are the bucket heads who can't hit a shot. They are always missing. It's a joke that keeps coming up. In A New Hope, there's a Stormtrooper who hits his head on the top of a door. They're not cut out for what they're doing. And I feel like a lot of people might sign up to be Stormtroopers who are just doing it for a paycheck, and then the rebellion happens and now they're forced to be soldiers and they're just not cut out for it. And I think it'd be interesting, especially being the Empire, that the Stormtroopers are asked to do something that they're not particularly happy with doing. Like they're asked to fire on civilians or something. If you're looking at being a comedic thing, I think you can play into these characters who are Stormtroopers, but they're really like the stereotypical terrible Stormtroopers, the typical bucketheads that can't hit a shot. But then eventually we have a little bit more of a serious tone. Maybe they decide that they don't want to be Stormtroopers anymore, and then they go join the rebellion, and they're forged by their experiences. So when the time that they are in the rebellion, they are a lot more capable. Really great ideas though. Thank you for your comment. Walker Dead writes, I would love to see an Ayla Secura's TV series on Disney Plus explaining how she survived Order 66 in canon, and I would love to see a Snoke movie on Disney Plus called Snoke: A Star Wars Story. Okay, so Ayla Secura would be a great idea. If we go back to Commander Bly in the 327th, Ayla Secura was a Jedi that was attached to that regiment. So I think that if we were going to do a TV series, you could maybe make one and the same. That if you're going to do an Ayla Secura TV series, that we also bring in Commander Bly and the 327th. What's interesting though is that you point out that she survived Order 66. She didn't. Ayla Secura definitely did not survive Order 66, because in Revenge of the Sith, we see her get betrayed by Commander Bly. She is shot on Felucia. She falls. She gets shot some more. She's definitely dead. Unfortunately, she does not survive Order 66. But again, I would love to see a TV series, maybe perhaps even a mini series where it shows Ayla Secura during some of the events of the Clone Wars. So we do get a lot into the clone troopers and we do get some FaceTime with them, but also we get to see these big battle sequences building up to Order 66. They betray her and then we see what the clones do immediately after. I think that'd be interesting. But your idea for a Snoke movie, I don't think that there's anything to Snoke anymore. I think after The Rise of Skywalker, we learn that Snoke and Palpatine are the same character. Snoke was essentially a puppet. Maybe Snoke was a Force sensitive that Palpatine then manipulated and started cloning and turned the clones into puppets. If I were to guess, if I were to bet, Snoke is just an identity that was created by Palpatine. Snoke was grown in a lab. He was manufactured. There's really no story to tell there. Unless they wanted to fill in the gaps of how Palpatine did that, then maybe, but still, I don't think that's a thing that they do. And to be completely honest, I think they avoid most things sequels for a little bit. Just my opinion. Crystal Cat 100 writes, I had an idea for something really stupid, but at the same time something unique. You know those really cool nature shows? Well, why not create a nature show, but it's in Star Wars? It can be a fun little mini-series, but an in-depth analysis of wildlife in Star Wars universe being developed during the wait for something bigger. Right off the bat, I don't think they would do this. I'm thinking in the sense of it being taken seriously, of it being like a nature show where characters in Star Wars were shooting this documentary. I don't see them doing that. However, if it was shot as like a behind the scenes of Star Wars, where they talk about a lot of the different environments and what inspired those environments, what inspired some of these creatures, like a making of show, like a making of Star Wars, that I could see them doing. Like you sit down with George Lucas and George Lucas is explaining like how he thought up the idea for Tatooine, or how he thought up the idea for Hoth, or how he thought up the idea for even something like Felucia. What are Womp Rats? Where did all of that stuff come from? If you take a step back and it's not in Star Wars canon, but it's something of like a making of behind the scenes thing, that I can see. Jake Trailer writes, didn't Lucas straight up announce Mace Windu? I assume Mace Windu is alive recently. Here's the thing. It doesn't matter what George Lucas says anymore. George Lucas does not have any control of what is or is not canon. George Lucas can sit here and say, when I created Return of the Jedi, I purposely killed off Boba Fett. Boba Fett is dead. Well, guess what? Disney decided otherwise. When they made Mandalorian Season 2, they decided to bring in Boba Fett. Nothing that George Lucas says at this point should be taken as canon. He doesn't have control anymore. So as much as I want to believe that Mace Windu is alive and that we'll see him in a future property, and I know Samuel L. Jackson believes that Mace Windu is still alive, and I believe he's willing to play that character again if asked. At this point of the game, with the property under Disney, nothing that George Lucas says should be taken as canon, unfortunately. TM Skinny writes, I agreed with just about everything said. Star Wars movies that aren't a part of the main trilogy should always be about the questions that need answers, in my opinion. Solo and Rebels are exactly what Star Wars shouldn't do. A Darth Bane movie would be the most interesting thing I can possibly imagine coming from Star Wars, and I bet they'll never give it a try. Never say never, because I think that there are some people that said they'll never bring in Boba Fett again. And here we are. They'll never create another Yoda species character. And here we are again with Baby Yoda. I think that the interesting thing to Darth Bane, who is canon, we see him in Clone Wars, or at least an illusion of him. We know that Darth Bane tells two stories with his story. The Sith Empire, how it fell, and how the rule of two got established. I think that the story of Darth Bane is also including and answering those questions. You say that they'll never do it. I say that it's actually quite likely that they eventually go back and do that. If we're going to explore a new time period, talk about characters that have been referenced, questions that need answers, this is one of them. I agree with what you said about Solo, that it's not really something that we needed. I don't think anybody was asking for a Solo spin-off at the time that Solo came out. I will say that when Solo first came out, I was very indifferent on it. I felt like it's a movie that was just, it had a checklist of things that it wanted to do, and the whole plot is checking things off of that checklist, going from the one to the other, to the other, to the other. I do like the movie a little bit better upon a second viewing, but it's not really a movie that I needed, and it focuses on a character that I think didn't really need that origin story. We didn't need an explanation into his name. We could have just been like, yeah, that's his name. But instead, they're like, no, there's meaning behind his name. He got it from somewhere. You're answering questions that nobody asked. You said Rebels, so let's talk about the Rebels series. I stayed away from Rebels for a while. First of all, I thought that it was for a demographic that is not me. Having seen it, here's the thing that it introduces. It kind of gives us a better idea for how the rebellion operates. That you have different rebellion cells all across the galaxy. So you have, the Rebels crew, you have the crew under Mon Mothma, you have Saw Gerrera, you have Infus Nest, different rebellions across the galaxy that are fighting against the Empire, and what you have is what's called the Rebel Alliance, an alliance between all these different Rebel cells. And I think the Rebels series does a good job of explaining all of that. I like Rebels, I do. I would be very interested in seeing a sequel series to Rebels. If we're talking about expanding the universe and doing things different and answering questions that we are asking, then yeah, absolutely. Tigger writes, great ideas, especially with Boba Fett and Mace. Would be great if Boba finds Mace for Darth Vader and asks him to kill Mace because he killed Jango. Yoda together with Qui-Gon Jinn, Clone Trooper Squad during Clone Wars brutal battles, Darth Maul with Kira after Solo, Obi-Wan between 3 and 4 on Tatooine killing sand people, watching Luke race and killing Darth Maul, same scene like in Rebels, Underworld canceled series 1313 on Coruscant with bounty hunters like Embo, Aurra Singh, Cad Bane, and young Boba, Boba Fett during a heist together with Solo, IG-88, Dengar, and Boss. After that, he starts to hate Solo because of his betrayal, and second movie or appearance after episode 6 in The Mandalorian, X-Wing Pilot Squad after episode 6, Old Republic trilogy, Lando as a sequel to Solo, a Star Wars story, connects to Infus Nest and Saw Gerrera and building up Cloud City, Palpatine with Plagueis, Knights of Ren, something between 6 and 7, what happened, how the First Order could be formed, remake of Clone Wars 2003 as a prequel to the Clone Wars, showing other battles and appearances appearances of characters like Grievous, Anakin, and Obi-Wan. Okay, there's a lot of ideas here. So I'm going to touch on each idea for a couple of seconds. Your first one, Boba and Mace. I think that that's a story that needs telling. If Mace Windu is in the world, I think you attach it to Boba. We know we're getting a Boba Fett TV series. I think it's going to be more focused on the idea of the criminal underworld. Maybe he's still looking for Mace. I think that we have to wait and see. We're getting it later this year. We have to wait and see, like, what is Boba's motivation now that he has taken over Jabba's palace. He's basically taken that position. But I think that that's a confrontation that we still need to get. And I think that that's an excuse to bring back Mace Windu. If he survived Order 66, what was he doing since Order 66? If we're getting it in the Boba Fett series, we know it's going to be post Return of the Jedi. So when all of this was happening and the rebellion was kicking off, where was Mace Windu? Your idea of Boba finds Mace for Darth Vader and asks him to kill Mace. I don't think that they include Vader at all, especially with we're getting the Boba Fett series, which is post Mandalorian Season 2, which is post Return of the Jedi. I don't think we're going to see anything Boba related during the events of the original trilogy when Darth Vader would have still been alive. I also think that we don't attach Boba Fett to Darth Vader all the time. I'm not against the idea of maybe Boba Fett did odd jobs for Vader here and there. I do agree that I think that we should have Boba and Mace confront each other. Yoda together with Qui-Gon Jinn. I don't think there's anything here. Because, I mean, Yoda has a connection with all Jedi. If you assume that as you're training, all Jedi at one point or another trained under Yoda, I didn't really pick up on any real connection between Qui-Gon Jinn and... Oh, well, although, during the Clone Wars, I think it's like season 6, Yoda has this sort of spiritual quest that he goes on because he keeps hearing Qui-Gon's voice. Essentially, it's telling us that Qui-Gon came back from the Netherrealm of the Force. We learn a lot about the living force and the cosmic force during this arc. We know that Qui-Gon Jinn presumably is the one that taught Yoda how to become a Force ghost, and it was Yoda who taught Obi-Wan, and so on and so forth. There's some threads that you can pull on to make that story something. Clone Trooper squad during Clone Wars, we talked about that already. I think that if we're going to go ahead and do an Aayla Secura with Commander Bly, even like Commander Wolf, I think that there's so many clone troopers that are characters, but if we're just looking for, we just want to see clone troopers during the Clone Wars, I think that if we were to do the Aayla Secura series, Commander Bly and his unit, that checks that box. Darth Maul with Qi'ra after Solo. Once again, we talked about this. I think that there's a lot of gaps in Darth Maul's story. I would love to see more of what happens with Qi'ra and Maul after Solo. Obi-Wan between 3 and 4 on Tatooine. We're getting it. I don't know if there's a date to it, but we're getting it. We're getting the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, which is going to be telling that exact story. Actually, fascinatingly enough, and I mentioned in the video that I don't want to see Vader and Obi-Wan meet up until like their events in A New Hope. I was going off the assumption that they never met up, that the last time they saw each other was on Mustafar. I said don't do that because I thought that it would have broken canon, that it's like, no, it contradicts the original trilogy, but nothing in the original trilogy states that the last time Vader and Obi-Wan saw each other was on Mustafar. The line that Vader has in A New Hope when he is on the Death Star and he senses Obi-Wan is there as well, he says, I sense something, a presence I've not felt since... and then he never finishes the line. He could literally have just said, a presence I've not felt since yesterday. I love the idea that they're bringing back Hayden Christensen to portray Darth Vader. I'm sure he's just going to be wearing the suit. We might get some out of suit things with him because they decided to cast Hayden Christensen, because you could have just put anybody in the suit, get James Earl Jones to do the voice again. I don't think that they're going to get anybody else to do the voice. I think James Earl Jones is coming back to do the voice, even though it's going to be based about Obi-Wan and his adventures on Tatooine as he's watching over Luke. The idea that they're gonna have a clash again, that's why he can have the line in Return of the Jedi where he says he's more machine now than man, because he understands, because he's seen what Vader has become. And also I think it helps with the Vader story. I think the one gap in Vader's story is that we don't really see the transition from Anakin to Vader. Literally, yes, we did. We see him get the suit, we see him get the name, we see him turn to the dark side. But really at the end of Revenge of the Sith, in my opinion, it's more like it's Anakin in Vader's armor, and we eventually have to get him to become the badass Jedi hunter that he becomes. We get a little of that in the Vader comics where he goes through all of the rites of passage that a Sith would have to go through. But I think that having him in the Obi-Wan series is a way of filling in some of those gaps. I don't think they redo the killing of Maul. I think that the killing of Maul is in Rebels, and if you want to see a conclusion to that story, we just have to fill in the gaps with Maul's story prior to Rebels. Underworld 1313 on Coruscant with bounty hunters. That's something I could see Cad Bane coming in. If we're going to do something more Underworld on Coruscant specifically, specifically, or maybe even a younger Boba, maybe, but I think that we're gonna get the underworld stuff in the Boba Fett series. If they decide to do a Maul series or movie with Kira and we get more of the underworld with him as well, it's the same thing that I keep saying every time Clone Troopers comes up in these comments, is that I keep pointing back to the one that we were already brainstorming. So I'll do the same thing with the bounty hunters. Group them all together. They're gonna pop up. They're gonna pop up in either the Maul series or movie, or they're gonna pop up in the Boba Fett thing. Boba Fett during a heist together with Solo, IG-88, Dengar, Bosk. I would love to see Bosk again. He gets some screen time in the Clone Wars series. IG-88 would be pretty cool. After that, he starts to hate Solo because of his betrayal. I don't think that there's a hate between Boba Fett and Solo. I think that the reason why Boba Fett was hunting Han Solo was because it was just a job that Jabba gave him. I don't think that there is anything that has to speak to the hate between the characters or any sort of rivalry between the two characters. But you're saying that like you want to see Boba Fett again after episode 6 in The Mandalorian. Well, you got it. I don't think they do this one right here. Honestly, I don't need to see more Solo. I don't. X-Wing pilot squad after episode 6. We were talking about Rogue Squadron earlier, and presumably it's going to be during the original trilogy. But if they were ever to do a sequel to that, you know, what happens to the X-Wing pilots or the Rogue Squadron after the second Death Star? Because here's the thing. The Chuck Wendig Aftermath and Aftermath Life Debt, Aftermath Empire's End, it talks about the period after episode 6 where the rebellion and the Empire kept fighting each other. I haven't read any of these books yet, but I do have them. And you can see on the front cover of the original Aftermath book, it says the war is not over. Okay, they didn't have Vader, they didn't have the Emperor, so they're not being led by the Sith anymore, but they still had military leaders that tried to organize and fought back against the rebellion. There was also Operation Cinder. There were some contingencies that the Emperor had set up. The war still continued up until the Battle of Jakku, and I think after Jakku, that's when the war officially ended between the Empire and the rebellion, and then the New Republic was formed. If you ever to do a sequel to Rogue Squadron, and Rogue Squadron's during the original trilogy, and the sequel is whatever happens after the original trilogy, I think that that's the direction that you go with. Old Republic trilogy, if you're going to be in the Old Republic, I would say go before the game. I know the game's not canon, but I know that they are talking about doing a remaster of the original KOTOR game, and I think that when you do that remaster, you consider it canon. You also have the open-ended ending. You have your dark side ending and your light side ending, so you can't really do a whole lot after. Either canonize one of the endings or you find a way to link them together. It's like a diamond, right? You start in the same place, you branch off, but you still end in the same place. So if you were to do a trilogy after that end point, I don't really know what happens after. I know that they have the Old Republic MMO game, which takes place after Knights of the Old Republic. I think you go before that. I think you talk about like the Mandalorian Wars and Jedi Civil War, canonize Darth Revan, talk about his life in the middle of the Mandalorian Wars. I think that that's the direction that you go in. Lando as a sequel to a Solo story connects to Infus Nest and Saw Gerrera and building up the Cloud City. Well, we know that they're going to be doing a Lando series. What we don't know is it a sequel to Solo, or is it just a sort of like a chronologization of all of his antics that he gets into? Because we see him pop up in Rebels. He's involved in a lot of different things in Rebels. And we also see in Solo that he has what are called the Calrissian Chronicles. I think it'd be really entertaining if they decided to take this series and the voiceover is painting himself as the hero, but what we see is obviously him out of his element, not a hero. I think that that could be an entertaining twist on it, but having it connect to Infus Nest and Saw Gerrera, I don't see that. I don't think that Lando had a ton of Rebel connections. Yeah, he pops up in Rebels and he's worked with that squad, but I don't think he was specifically working with the rebellion for the sake of working with the rebellion because he believed in their cause. I think he would occasionally cross paths with them. I don't think we follow Infus Nest or Saw Gerrera with Lando, but building up to Cloud City, that I could see. If we're talking about questions that need answered, how did Lando get a hold of Cloud City and what happens as a result of having Cloud City? Basically taking Lando's story from Solo, building all the way up to where we see him in Empire Strikes Back. Palpatine with Plagueis, yeah, I mean, I was always of the opinion that I felt that Snoke was Plagueis, but obviously that's incorrect. I think early day Palpatine, of how he was discovered by Plagueis, how he was taken on as an apprentice of Plagueis, I think that's a story that we can explore. Knights of Ren, okay, here's the thing. A couple of times I've referenced in this video that I would avoid doing anything with the sequels, mainly because I think the sequel trilogy as a whole is not very good, and I think Disney knows that. Their lack of a roadmap of what they were doing with those movies, I think really handcuffed them into what they were able to accomplish. Maybe we don't touch the sequel stuff. Maybe we fill in the gap a little bit more between episode 6 and 7. Now, the other side of this thing is that I think that even though I would avoid doing anything specifically from the sequels for the time being, I think it's important to eventually create materials around it to hopefully elevate it. For example, when we watch The Last Jedi and we see Luke Skywalker, we want him to light up the green lightsaber and just rip people apart. Be the badass Luke Skywalker that we always imagined that he eventually became. Unfortunately, we never saw that. Instead, what we got in The Last Jedi, we saw him being a hermit, really done with it. He was cranky old man Luke. And it sucks because it's like you go into it with expectations, and when your expectations aren't met, you get disappointed. I think it's important to still appreciate the movie on its merits, and even though I didn't get the Luke Skywalker I was hoping for, I still appreciate what was there. That Luke Skywalker is at the end of his life, he's at the end of his career. This is where he ended up after all of his adventures. Like, ever since the Force got introduced, ever since he found the lightsaber that originally belonged to his father, things have been pretty bad for him. His aunt and uncle died, he got involved in a war, he got his arm chopped off, he discovered that his dad was basically Star Wars Hitler. Things went poorly ever since Luke discovered what the Force was and became a Jedi. So I can imagine that at a certain point, after everything that happened with Kylo Ren, he's just done with it. However, having something that surrounds this material and elevates it, even though we didn't get that badass Luke Skywalker moment in The Last Jedi, we still got it in The Mandalorian Season 2. So it's like, no, we still got that badass Luke Skywalker moment. It just happened before when we saw it in The Last Jedi. When you look at the Knights of Ren and you say, yeah, they didn't do anything cool, but then you do something where it shows the formation of them, maybe even the First Order started getting formed. How did the Empire transition from the Empire into the First Order? We all know that this was all a contingency from Palpatine. This was all part of Palpatine's plan, but now we see it actually taking place. I recently did a Star Wars binge. I watched from The Phantom Menace and I went all the way through, watched all the series, the animated stuff, all the spin-offs and everything, and I built all the way up to Rise of Skywalker. And when you get to the sequel era, there's a switch and it feels very jarring, and I think that it's important to fill in that gap so it's more gradual. Even though we never saw the Knights of Ren do anything cool, if we show them doing something cool in another material, then I feel like it improves their appearance. Almost like when Ben Solo does start to take them out, that we realize how formidable they are, and so therefore that's how badass Kylo Ren always was. But also I think it's important to talk about the First Order. So again, I don't think that they do anything related to the sequels anytime soon. I think they give it a wide berth for the time being, but eventually I think you should surround it with stuff and elevate it to be better. And finally, your last comment here, which is a remake of Clone Wars 2003 as a prequel to the Clone Wars series that we know as canon. So what this commenter is referring to is these two things right here. These two seasons of Clone Wars, which aired on the Cartoon Network, and they were like in between other shows that they were doing. It was like 5-minute episodes. Eventually in the second season, they were like 15-minute episodes. Essentially what it does is that it bridges the gap from Attack of the Clones all the way to Revenge of the Sith. It actually builds all the way up to the Battle of Coruscant. It shows how Palpatine got kidnapped by Grievous. It shows how that battle started, that it was just a sudden boom, we're under attack now. But it also introduces a lot of important characters that just suddenly show up in the Clone Wars series. Asajj Ventress, Grievous, how Anakin went from being a Padawan to a full-fledged Jedi Knight. So if you were to do a remake of this and clean it up, we get those badass Grievous moments, maybe even a little bit of an explanation as to why he's coughing all the time, which this series does. Right as Palpatine is being kidnapped, Mace Windu shows up and uses the Force and crushes his chest, and then he starts coughing, so that when Revenge of the Sith kicks around and he's coughing, oh, that's in response to Mace Windu really messed him up. I think that that'd be interesting if we were to reimagine directly from Attack of the Clones and building up to where the canon Clone Wars is, filling in that gap a little bit, and then we get the proper introduction of Asajj Ventress. We see Anakin become a fully fledged Jedi Knight. I could see that happen. Gallifreyan Animations gives us a big one. A lot of different ideas here. These are some good thoughts. I've had some ideas of my own lately about some spin-off films / shows I'd like to see. Count Dooku film between The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones about his fall to the dark side and the clone army creation. Stormtrooper show between Revenge of the Sith and Attack of the Clones about a squad of troopers who willingly join the Empire but maybe later regret their career choice. Qui-Gon Jinn film, obviously before The Phantom Menace, probably about him with Dooku and or Obi-Wan, likely diving into the idea of the living Force a bit more. General Grievous film, like you said, relating to his past or his frightening appearances in the 2003 Clone Wars miniseries, which actually leads me to Clone Wars film live action based around some of the stories that we got in 2003 would help with character development for important big screen characters that we didn't get in a movie. Knights of the Old Republic films. I've caught word that a Knights of the Old Republic trilogy, which I think would be awesome to see. Snoke film based around his rise to power in the First Order. Captain Phasma show. She was potentially a cool character, but we never got to see much of her, which is a real shame. Ahsoka show. As much as I hate the 2008 Clone Wars and the characters within it, I suppose it's inevitable that the fans will demand such a series. Knights of Ren film/show, since we never really got enough from him or from them. Post-Order 66 film. I saw the suggestion in another comment, and I think it would be really cool to see a sort of horror Star Wars story on the big screen. A new Republic show could show us the rise of the Republic after the rise of Skywalker and could be more politically and politicky and dramatic instead of war-y and overdone. Lando Calrissian film/show, maybe not a direct follow-up to Solo, but perhaps a few years later with the further adventures in Cloud City. Obi-Wan Kenobi show/film. I put show first because I would really enjoy seeing stories with Ewan McGregor longer than 2 hours, but I'd open up to a film as well. And that's as much as I can think of at the moment. If any Disney executive or future director is reading this, please take these thoughts into consideration. Okay, let's break each of these down. You got your Count Dooku film. I don't think that they're going to do anything Count Dooku live action anymore, simply because unfortunately we no longer have Christopher Lee to play that character. I think it's a little distasteful to take on someone's likeness. I think it'd be more respectful to just kind of leave his work as is. If they were to go into the past, like way in the past, like a much younger Count Dooku and then cast a younger actor, that I can see. But I don't think we get anything between The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones in live action. If they were to do this in maybe an animated form, that I could see. I know you mentioned a little bit later that you don't like the 2008 Clone Wars series. I love it. I think you really should give it a second go. Initially, the first couple of seasons, Ahsoka was very annoying, geared toward a younger demographic, but it's actually a really great series once it actually gets going and it gets legs under itself. The reason why I bring this up is because I think that a Count Dooku in the Clone Wars, we learn is a political figure. He is the Palpatine to the Separatists. In Attack of the Clones, he's referred to as a political idealist. He's someone who joins and forms the Separatists and he acts as their political leader. As far as like the public view, everybody thought Count Dooku was the leader of the Separatists. Now we know that there was a higher power that was actually controlling both sides of the Clone Wars, and that was Palpatine. I could see this in animated form. I don't think that they do a live action Count Dooku movie specifically in this time period and showing the creation of the clone army. If those pieces were put into place maybe even before we see something even further back where it's a much younger Count Dooku with a different actor, potentially. Stormtrooper show. So we talked about the trooper buddy comedy already, where we have two stormtroopers who are the typical stormtrooper stereotype, can't hit a shot, and it's kind of a little goofy and a little comedically presented. But then eventually we take a serious note where they realize their career might not be what they envisioned it would be. It's like, oh crap, we work for space Nazis. Maybe we shouldn't be doing this anymore. But also don't forget, that's a story that we've already seen. Finn in The Force Awakens. He was a stormtrooper, got asked to fire on civilians, and he didn't want to do it, and he decided to defect. Qui-Gon Jinn film, I wouldn't mind seeing it. Maybe just don't include Dooku in that series. Maybe it's just Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan. But diving into this idea of the living force, we know in the Clone Wars series that Qui-Gon eventually comes back from the nether realm of the Force and he teaches Yoda how to be a Force ghost. Maybe this series covers how he discovered how to do that. And that would fill in some gaps with the mysticism of the Force, what the Force is supposed to be. The Grievous film, I think that there's a lot of mystery surrounding the Grievous character. I think that we see a lot of him in Clone Wars. Obviously, he's in Revenge of the Sith, but we don't know a lot of origin to his character. How did he become a cyborg? We know that he's not strictly speaking a droid. He's organic that had these cybernetics attached to him, but he became super capable of fighting Jedi. How did he do that? Like, we know that he was trained by Count Dooku. Again, it becomes difficult to use Count Dooku in a lot of this stuff. What was he before he became a cybernetic? Maybe we can see him being just the badass like we saw in 2003. Maybe we get an answer as to why he coughs all the time, and maybe he's less capable since that injury happened to him. I don't think that they do anything Grievous related, but if they did, I think those are some things that you can do. Though you can also do that in a comic as well. The Clone Wars, again, every time Clone Wars comes up, I point back up to the Ayla Secura series with Commander Bly. We're going to do a movie or a series based on this crew. It's not the 501st, but it's Commander Wolf and his detachment, or it's Commander Bly July in the 327th, and then we have a Jedi who's the one that's assigned to them, their general. Knights of the Old Republic, if you're going to do something in Knights of the Old Republic, I would recommend doing it before the Knights of the Old Republic game cover, like the Mandalorian Wars and the story of Revan, and maybe even go even before that with Exar Kun and stuff. I wouldn't do anything after, because I think that there's too many role-playing games with too many branching paths that you can really do something after. Snoke film, I don't think they do anything with Snoke. I think Snoke is just a puppet. Captain Phasma. So Captain Phasma suffers from the Boba Fettness disease, which is that she looks cool, but doesn't do anything cool. She's a pushover in The Force Awakens. She fights back a little bit. She's got a little bit of teeth in The Last Jedi, but then dies anyway. There is a Captain Phasma book, and actually a friend of mine read it, and he didn't like it all that much. Again, maybe we avoid everything with the sequel stuff. I don't think that you kick things off with a Captain Phasma right now, but if you were to do something like you show the transition of how the Empire became the First Order, how the First Order rose to power, maybe including Captain Phasma in that, I personally am not interested at all in seeing something Captain Phasma centric. Your Ahsoka show, I'm a little upset that you think that the Clone Wars series, again, I recommend you give it another shot, because I think that Ahsoka becomes a much better character. Get through the first couple of seasons, because I think that what comes later, like especially season 3 and on, is some of the best Star Wars I think I've ever seen. The last 4 episodes of that series, hands down, my favorite Star Wars. I will never watch Revenge of the Sith again without watching it concurrently with the last 4 episodes of that series. But also, we are going to get an Ahsoka series. It is going to be after Mandalorian season 2. We're going to be exploring her story as she's looking for Grand Admiral Thrawn. And I have a theory that what they're doing with all of these shows, like surrounding the Mandalorian, they're basically creating a new sequel story that they're telling. If you're familiar with what goes down in Legends after Return of the Jedi, there's a lot of stories and a lot of characters that come up that do not come up in the sequel trilogy. So I'm wondering if maybe all that stuff did happen where you had a Mara Jade or you had Ben Skywalker or something, and maybe those characters came and went within this time period, which speaks to why Luke is so over it when The Last Jedi comes around. But I think Ahsoka is going to be building up to Grand Admiral Thrawn, which I think is going to be the big bad of whatever their crossover series is going to be. I'm actually very excited for Ahsoka. I love Ahsoka, and I recommend you give the Clone Wars series another shot. I really, really do. Knights of Ren, we never really get a whole lot from them. Again, don't touch anything from the sequel in the immediate future, but eventually we're going to have to, because I think that it's important to surround it with stuff to hopefully elevate it. I think we do something that fills in the gap of who the Knights of Ren are, how formidable they are. Yeah, we need to see more of them. We heard them mentioned, we saw the flash of them, and then they showed up. They suffer from the Boba disease, where they don't really do anything, but they look cool. Post Order 66, yeah, it'd be great to see a new character, a new Jedi surviving Order 66. Like, focus on that. I feel like we always hear the stories, but we never focus on them. Like, even Cal Kestis, even during the events of Jedi Fallen Order, I was excited for Jedi Fallen Order because I thought the entirety of the game was him surviving Order 66. But really, that game kind of kicks off after he's already survived it, and now he's on his own path and he has no problem cutting through troopers. Even though he's being hunted by the Inquisitors, the immediate post Order 66, where Jedi are everywhere and they're all being hunted, like, what are you doing? Like, how are we surviving? A new Republic show. So you have the Republic in the prequels, then it's the Empire, then it's the New Republic, then it's the First Order, and so now this commenter is suggesting the new Republic comes after that. I feel like once you put your second new on something, that maybe we just don't do the Republic anymore. Maybe we do something different. But this is coming after the Rise of Skywalker. I don't think they're going to do anything involving the sequel trilogy for a while. They realize that they flubbed that up, and now they're going to give it some space. They're definitely not going to do something that comes after it. What you're saying, though, is like a political drama instead of something that's more action-based. I would argue that instead of doing the new Republic, that maybe we do a political drama of what happened within the New Republic after Hosnian Prime was destroyed by the Starkiller base in The Force Awakens. If you ever see the show, it's on Netflix, and I'm a little upset that they canceled it. I don't think they're doing a season 4, but there's 3 seasons of it's called The Designated Survivor. It speaks to this idea that amongst the president's cabinet, the U.S. president's cabinet, there is an individual who is picked as the designated survivor. They are taken to a secret location when something big is going down. And so in the show, there's like a State of the Union address, and then the Capitol explodes. Somebody set a bomb and it blows up and it kills the president, his cabinet, the vice president, everybody. So the chain of command gets wiped out. In the event that something catastrophic like that happened, the designated survivor would then be sworn in as president so that we would always have a leader. So I'm wondering, would there be a political political drama in Star Wars that could potentially follow. Like, okay, Hosnian Prime is destroyed. All of our leadership is wiped out. The First Order is moving in on our territory. Who is our leader? And so you have this designated survivor stepping in and is trying to put the pieces together after all this chaos is happening. How do you hold together the New Republic? How do you fight back against the First Order? I think that that is more compelling and better of a setting for this political drama that you're pitching. I don't think that they do anything post Rise of Skywalker. Lando Calrissian film or show, they're doing that. Don't know the time period. We don't know if it's going to be a follow-up to Solo. We don't know if it's going to be before Solo. We don't know if it's going to even be building up to Cloud City or even involving Cloud City. We just don't know enough information about it yet. I would be interested in pretty much any of the above. Well, to be honest with you, I'm not so thrilled about a Lando series because, again, we're getting into that. We're touching on the same characters over and over and over, and we're not expanding the universe. But still, now that I know that we're definitely doing it, okay, fine, I'll definitely watch it. But it gets into that same category of we're hitting the same characters again. We're doing this thing again that we shouldn't be doing. You mentioned Obi-Wan as well. Like, I'll even say the same thing to Obi-Wan. I'm so happy they're doing an Obi-Wan series. I really am. And I'm so happy that Ewan McGregor is coming back. And I'm so happy that they're going to get Obi-Wan and Vader round 2. And I'm happy that they're going to explore this period in Obi-Wan's life. Again, it still falls onto that category of we're hitting the same characters again, still stuck in our little container that we think is Star Wars. We need to expand. We need to do new characters. Once we start expanding and exploring new periods and introducing new characters, then we can start doing spin-offs of those characters. Like, why does it always have to be about Obi-Wan or Lando or Solo or this and that and this and that? But thank you for your comment. Gave us a lot to talk about. Henry Lewis writes, I would rather have them make a movie trilogy about Tar Vizsla and his role during the Mandalorian Wars. Maybe get something new for once instead of just playing off the old stuff like Revan. As much as I love Revan, he's a bit overrated. Now, I take your comment about Revan being overrated a little personal, but Tar Vizsla, to my knowledge, the first and only Mandalorian, the first or only, one of the two or both, that was inducted into the Jedi Order. And when he created his lightsaber, he created what is known as the Dark Saber. It's got the black core and the white glow, which has been in Star Wars before, but this is the canon version and there's only one. It's very unique and it's very important to the Mandalorians. It is a symbol of leadership for the Mandalorians. Now, you mentioned his role during the Mandalorian Wars. I don't think that there's anything that speaks to Tar Vizsla being in the Mandalorian Wars. Now, there are two versions of the Mandalorian Wars, and perhaps one day those two versions will be one and the same. But the first is that in Knights of the Old Republic, which is still not canon, we get this idea that the Mandalorian Wars happened between the Republic and the Mandalorians, and it started when the Mandalorians started encroaching on territories in the Outer Rim. The Republic responded, but they needed Jedi support, but the Jedi really didn't want to be a part of it, so that's when Revan stepped in and was like, no, I'm not listening to the Council, and I'm leading other Jedi into this fight, and he turned the tide of the war. Ultimately, that did lead to Revan's downfall, which turned him into Darth Revan, which then sets up the events of the Jedi Civil War, where the Jedi were fighting against the Sith, and then setting up the events of the Knights of the Old Republic game. But there's no mention of Tar Vizsla. I think it's Mandalore the Great. And the leader in Knights of the Old Republic was always taking on the name of Mandalore. So it's not only a planet, but it's also a title or a mantle. Now, the other version of the Mandalorian Wars, which we get in Rebels, which is that we know that it's a war between the Mandalorians and the Jedi because Kanan Jarrus says the Jedi won the war with Mandalore. We also know that Tar Vizsla, after he died, the Jedi took possession of the Darksaber and then the Mandalorians took it back. Maybe that's the event that sparks the Mandalorian Wars, and then we still get something that is a little bit more in line with what we get with the Mandalorian Wars in Knights of the Old Republic, where when the Jedi took the Darksaber, the Mandalorians took it personally, they took it back, and then the war started happening and Revan got involved. I feel like you have to talk about Revan. If you're gonna bring Revan in canon and you're gonna talk about the Mandalorian Wars, unless you're gonna change what happens in KOTOR, you have to talk about Revan. That's even if you intend to bring KOTOR into canon, because there's no guarantee that that's gonna happen. If you bring the game into canon, then you bring in the fact that Revan did fight in the Mandalorian Wars and the KOTOR version of the Mandalorian Wars did happen, which means you can't talk about the Mandalorian Wars without talking about Revan. But going more specifically into Tar Vizsla, I don't know if they do a trilogy, perhaps one movie, or maybe even it's a TV series. I think we need to open ourselves up to this idea of it doesn't have to be a movie, it can be a series as well. Because I think that's what Marvel's doing. I think the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is the Disney Plus series. I think we're going to see less movies and more of these series because we're getting, what is it, like 6 TV series and like 4 movies. Like, we already have more TV series in the MCU than we do with Marvel. We can take that same idea and apply it to Star Wars. It doesn't have to be a movie. It could be a TV series. But interesting idea. I think we should explore Tar Vizsla a little bit more, because then it'll give us more backstory into the Darksaber, which is very heavily featured in The Mandalorian. Mitch Fuller writes, the prequels are about Anakin's downfall, not Vader. I don't disagree. If we're going to look at this technically and literally, Anakin and Vader are the same person. So they are about Vader. It's just about Vader's life before he became Vader. But yes, the prequels are about Anakin's downfall, which speaks to the idea that by the end of it, even though he became Darth Vader literally, I still feel like it's Anakin Skywalker in Vader's armor, and we still never saw the full-fledged transition into Vader, which I'm hoping we get a little bit more of that in the Obi-Wan series. We do get a little bit of that in the Vader comics, where it's not like he walks into a store and buys a red lightsaber crystal, or he goes into a cave that has a bunch of red lightsaber crystals. He has to find a Jedi, fight the Jedi without a lightsaber, defeat him, take his lightsaber, take the kyber crystal, then put all of his hate into it, make it bleed, turn it red, and then that becomes his lightsaber. That all gets covered in the comics. But no, I don't disagree. The prequels are about Anakin's downfall, and they're not strictly speaking about Vader, but literally Anakin Skywalker and Vader are the same person. So really, they are and they aren't. Chapman A, is that the Omega symbol? So it's a Chapman Alpha Omega? Maybe. The new movie is low-key trash. So I do not like Rise of Skywalker. I really do not. I'm assuming that that's what you're referring to. What we do with movies like properties like Star Wars, we speculate a lot, right? It's fun to do that. As a fan, we do that. We'll sit here and we'll make guesses on what they should do with the next movie. And when we go to watch those movies and we have our ideas in our head, when we watch it unfold and our ideas are not being met, then all of a sudden we're disappointed because we were wrong. But I think it's important for us to remember to appreciate the movie for what it's presenting. So you should always watch the movie twice, because you go in, you watch it, and hopefully your theories are right. But when they're wrong, you get disappointed. So you should watch the movie a second time, knowing what happens, and then appreciate it for the story that it presents. I did this with The Rise of Skywalker. I went in with a lot of expectations, a lot of speculation, and I said, I think the movie should do A, B, and C, and it didn't do any of that. So what happened was that I was very disappointed, because I was like, damn, what I had in my head sounded a lot better. But I still gave the movie the benefit of the doubt. I saw a lot of people that actually really enjoying it. I actually have a friend who enjoyed the movie a lot. So I was like, you know what? I'll go watch it again. I watched it a second time and I still don't like it. I think that the movie spent far too much of its runtime trying to undo things that the previous movie did, rather than taking the baton and running with it. The Rise of Skywalker spent a lot of time undoing, specifically Kylo Ren. I think Kylo Ren's arc is decent throughout the entire trilogy. Kylo Ren was presented with, if we were to use the video game analogy, he got to a point of his story where he had the dark side ending or the light side ending, and that was on the bridge in The Force Awakens with Han Solo. I can walk away with my father now, I can redeem myself, I can try to course correct and make my family proud, or I can stab him in the chest with my lightsaber and choose the evil ending. And that's what he did. He chose the evil ending. So it was almost like after he killed Han Solo, the way that the trilogy should have continued was that there is no point of return for him anymore. Once he killed his own father, that's it. He's full evil now. So The Last Jedi kind of sets that up a little bit more, where again we're presented with this good ending or evil ending. You can kill Rey right now, or you can join Rey, or you can kill Snoke and take his place. And I feel like he again chose the evil ending. Instead of walking away with Rey, redeeming himself, he killed Snoke and then he tried to take control. He became the new supreme leader. So again, he chose the evil side. So twice we have Kylo Ren choosing the dark side. Yet in The Rise of Skywalker, we're left to assume that eventually he just goes, I don't want to do this anymore, and he throws his lightsaber into the water. I don't buy that. I don't. I just think that that's not the story they were telling. They should have embraced Kylo Ren as the villain. And I feel like it's a little bit fan servicey to try to bring the Emperor back. That didn't work for me. That movie disappoints me, and I try to give it the benefit of the doubt, and it doesn't work, unfortunately. But I don't disagree. I don't disagree. All right, last one. Not Lock Colton writes, think about a Trandoshan hunt horror movie. Like they wheeze you into like the first/main character. They show Trandoshans coming in and ripping them from their family. Then the character waking up in a cell on the ship, going to the Trandoshan moon. They make a friend or something on the ship that's some sort of cute species, maybe like another Wookiee or something. You know, make them sacrifice themselves for the main character. Super sad. I don't know how I would want to handle the ending though, but basically hunt a Star Wars story. You want to know what's interesting? You described a story arc that is in the Clone Wars series. I don't remember exactly when. I think it's season 3, but that literally happens. Ahsoka is on a mission. She gets kidnapped by Trandoshan. She's on a ship, and then she gets dropped on the Trandoshan moon, and they're being hunted by Trandoshans. She meets up with other Padawan Jedi, have been on the planet for a while. They got separated from their master, and now they're trying to survive on this planet. And it's actually a rite of passage for the Trandoshans. They are actually using one of their younger members, and they're like, you go kill a Jedi, and then you will earn our respect. You will be a part of our, I don't know, pack, crew, whatever. And you know what? Even taking it a step further, Wookiees are there. In fact, I think Chewbacca is there. What you've just described, literally a story arc in the Clone Wars series. I think it's like 2-3 episodes, complete with your whole, a character sacrifices themselves. Like, that happens. It's in the arc. It happens. So, because Clone Wars already did it, that now we're retreading the same step. We've seen this story before. I would recommend that you go check that out. I don't remember what the first episode of that arc was, but you should Google it. Check it out. Get Disney Plus. Watch it. And with that is our last comment. Really had a lot of fun doing this, to be honest. I would recommend, like, hey, in this video, if you want to comment more ideas, I'll certainly make another one when we've accumulated enough. I love engaging with the viewers. I think this is fun, and I would be so on board to do it again. Literally any of my videos. You got something you're speculating about, Marvel, Disney, Star Wars, DC, anything, whatever you got. It's future video games, Halo, Mass Effect, whatever. Speculate away. Let's keep this ball rolling. I love interacting with people. But thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a comment below if you wish to do that, about more Star Wars ideas if you want. Give the video a like, consider subscribing, hit the bell icon so you can be notified of all new video uploads, and check out one of these other recommended videos over here to the side. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you so much for your great ideas. I had a lot of fun speculating with you, and I'll see you next time.